The Valve Steam Deck is just a few months away for those who are lucky enough to get in on a December reservation. Myself, I got Q1 2022. What the hell can you do? I'll just have to wait, hold my breath. No, I won't, but I'm definitely excited. Hopefully sooner than later. I've said it plenty of times. Maybe people will start canceling. They won't go through with the reservations. They'll be like, holy crap, I got to get little Timmy and grandma some freaking stuff for Christmas or something, or whatever holidays are going on during that time. I can't afford to buy me a Steam Deck. Maybe there'll be a bunch of people who bow out and some of us get lucky and get a little earlier. But that's just, wishful thinking. We'll have to wait and see. Now, Steam Deck news, I see it all the time in my comments, people asking, what's going on? Is there anything new to discuss? And I do tend to, research the Steam Deck as often as I can, and it has been pretty dry out there as far as news. We're not really going to get too much more, solid news until it's closer to launch, but there have been some articles, some grumblings out there where I've seen people saying Valve is already planning the Steam Deck 2. It's going to be a complete 4K handheld. And when I saw that, I kind of hate when a company is launching a product or they're in that launch period and they start talking about their next version. Like, it's kind of like, well, I haven't even gotten this one yet. Like, I don't want to hear about a new one. No, I don't think that's actually the case here. It's just, one of those moments of let's look at what they said and, come up with some thoughts here. Of course, Valve is looking to the future. They've already discussed how they hope other manufacturers will get in on the Steam Deck, momentum and train and start making their own versions. And we've discussed that in the past as well. It's going to be a whole open thing. I'm curious to see what other companies do with this operating system, with this form factor and idea of having, a device geared around the Steam library as a whole. Could be pretty interesting. I mean, I'm sure we'll see companies like one-upping Valve, but that's a wait-and-see type of thing. There's nothing been announced yet. But yeah, of course, companies are always looking to the future. What are their next steps going to be after a successful or an unsuccessful product launch? And I think it's pretty obvious that this is going to do fairly well, at least for the initial launch through 2022. It seems like a lot of people are looking forward to this thing. And there's been a recent interview. There's been a bunch of interviews with members of the team from Valve, from their development team and whatnot. And we've talked about a few of these people in the past. Greg Coomer is one of them, and Lawrence Yang. Both of these guys, they have been doing a lot of interviews, and they recently did an interview with Rock Paper Shotgun. It's a pretty lengthy one, and there is a lot of interesting things to dissect that they talk about, and the news of them working on a new version of the Steam Deck really isn't one of them. They do mention it, and we'll get to that in a second. So in this interview, like I said, there's a lot of interesting things. They talked to them about, like, where was, at what point did Valve start talking about making the Steam Deck? Like, they were mostly software, and they kind of dabbled in hardware a little bit. Where did this idea come from? What was the evolution of this device? And Greg Coomer goes on to talk about how they've been discussing this device for several years, and it's a culmination of different past products and ideas that they've had, where they've mostly focused on software, and when they did the Steam controller and the Steam Link and all that stuff, it just kind of all combined into a vision to do something like this, a handheld PC. These aren't his exact words. I'm kind of paraphrasing, if you will. But that's essentially it. We've already known that. This is a culmination of previous attempts at products. But it also sounds like they were looking at different types of handhelds in the past, but ultimately they weren't interested in making a handheld device if it didn't play all of the games on Steam. They were looking at things that weren't using the typical x86 kind of PC solution, so maybe something more akin to a traditional, like, old school gaming system, something built on its own architecture. I'm not really sure with that, but definitely it was something that caused them to say, you know what, no, let's just make a portable PC because we already have this library of games sitting here. This is what we do. We sell games. So let's make a device that plays the games we already sell, right? It makes sense. So they talk about how when they started working with AMD, that's how these things really came to fruition, because they couldn't really do these things in the past, what they want to do with the Steam Deck. And the performance that they're going to get out of this thing, it just kind of fits for now. If they would have went back a couple years ago, the technology wasn't exactly there. Sure, they could have came up with something, but what would that have looked like? How big of a beast would have this thing been? And it's just all about the timing, the partnerships. They do talk quite a bit about dealing with AMD and partnering with them, and that's really how this came to be, was once they started working with AMD. That's just it. I mean, things started clicking, right? Now, the reason they start getting into the next iteration of the Steam Deck, which, like I said, they didn't really get into it too much. It's still something that was mentioned, but not into great detail. It does leave some things, open a bit, but they start going into that when they were asked about the dock and how does it output at a higher resolution. These are things we've discussed before, that the dock, it's just like the Nintendo Switch. The dock is just a dock to allow you to plug in an HDMI cable into a TV or a monitor. It's not actual hardware. Same thing with the Steam Deck here. Greg Coomer, he does initially say it does, yeah. It delivers both DisplayPort and HDMI, and the resolution goes quite a bit higher. And then Mr. Yang, he says it's not the dock specifically that lets it output at a higher resolution. You can plug any HDMI to USB-C adapter into this, and it can output at 4K resolutions. These are things we've already known. They really haven't discussed their dock yet. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people want to know how much this thing is going to be, but there really hasn't been much information on that yet. But it's nothing special. It's just a accessory that gives you DisplayPort and HDMI output. That's it. So with that, they do talk about how, and we've discussed this too, the system does support like 4K, 8K, different refresh rates and whatnot, but it's a PC, with the target that they have playing it in handheld mode, the hardware, the specs and whatnot, it is a decently spec'd machine, but just like any other PC, once you start fiddle fucking around, messing with textures, settings, different graphics settings, your performance is going to vary. And with this hardware, it's one of those things, and they talk about it like, if you start tweaking settings and, lowering textures and stuff like that, depending upon the game, you'll be able to output 4K typically no problem. But you're going to have to really fine-tune those things. And that's where this kind of starts getting into the next iteration, I guess you would say, right? So the interviewer says, with technology moving forward all the time, at what point do you draw the line and say, this is it, right? That is a good question. They had a lot of answers to it, but at the end, Greg Coomer, he states, so your question about when do you draw the line, I think it's often extra interesting at Valve because so many of us want to treat even this device like a platform that can just be upgraded at will. And we can just, why not upgrade it every 3 months? Obviously, that wouldn't be the best service that we would do for game developers or customers if we tried to operate that way. We're already looking ahead to the future because we believe this is a product line that will have a long life. So, of course, we're thinking about what would we build next? And we're starting to make plans in those directions, but there is not a design for the Steam Deck 2. But we are thinking along those lines and having conversations already about where would we draw the line for our next iteration of devices. So that's kind of where it was at, and they go on talking about how, at a device like this, definitely there could be a possibility of having something like this that could output 4K resolution on the screen, everything no problem. But what would that actually look like? The limitations on hardware, chips and everything like that. What would this device look like? Sure, we can accomplish anything we want, but does it really make sense right now? It's you know, whenever you look at technology, things continually progress. Things get smaller, things get more powerful, you know, time goes on. So that's kind of, I think, where these talks about the Steam Deck 2 came from, where they didn't really say, like, yeah, there's a Steam Deck 2 that outputs at 4K resolution on the screen. They're just talking about, like, oh, yeah, you know, we have to look at, like, where do we want to end with the device? Where do we think the sweet spot is? And, you know, we're discussing those things for the future with newer devices later on. Not like, oh, yeah, we already have this in the works. It's, you know, going to be coming out, you know, type of thing. It's just like, you know, maybe in a couple years, this kind of technology will be more consumer friendly to make a device like this. That's essentially what they're talking about. I think a lot of people want to get ahead of themselves. I wouldn't really worry about it too much. Like I said earlier, I don't really like when companies start talking about what they're doing with their next product when the first one's not even out yet, the successor type of thing. But I don't think Valve really talked about that. Not in the sense that some people are bringing up to me or how some articles are kind of spinning it anyway. I'm really looking forward to the Steam Deck 1. If a Steam Deck 2 eventually comes out, I hope it's not like a year later type of thing. I don't want, like, you know, how the Oculus Quest, boom, Oculus Quest, next year we got a new one type of thing. Like, I don't like those kind of iterations. It would be cool if it was like, you know, a modular based system that we can upgrade ourselves, but that's not what this device is at the moment. I'm hoping for the best. I'm hoping that everything I want to play on this device works just fine. Really looking forward to getting it in my hands and sharing more of an impression with you guys. But yeah, that's where we're at right now. Let me know what you think down below. Really do appreciate every single one of you guys. With that said, I will catch y'all next time. Peace out. Bye-bye. And boom. Bye.